Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ontario Cryptids. I'm so happy to see you all back for another week of mysterious encounters. Can you believe we're already halfway through July? And I hope you're all making the most of the summer, whether it's camping, hiking, or just soaking up the sun. Today, I've got some truly intriguing encounter stories to share, including one that happened right here in Ontario. So stick around, you won't want to miss it. And if you enjoy this content, don't forget to hit the like button, the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. And if you have an encounter of your own, I'd love to hear about it. Send your stories to ontariocryptids@gmail.com. Now sit back, relax, and let's get to these stories. To begin this story, my girlfriend and I went to stay at Big Bear Lake in California for a week at a place called Blue Horizon Lodge on Edgemoor Road, located just off of Big Bear Boulevard. The trip was pure bliss aside from a handful of incidents that took place over the course of 4 days, beginning on July 6th and ending in the morning of July 9th. My girlfriend wanted to go to the lake in the afternoon to have a swim before we went out to eat later that day. So we walked up Edgemoor Road and headed west down Big Bear Boulevard, and we found a way to access the lake through a mostly empty field. After about 10 minutes of walking, her and I reached the edge of the lake where I noticed a white box with a lock on it. She didn't want to go into the water because the place that we found was in a cove-like area directly south of Holloway's Marine, and tons of gunk and crud was floating in the water. As we were standing on the edge of the lake, I noticed a big white box just sitting about 20 feet out in the water. I got curious as to why there was a box just sitting out in the water, so I trudged out through the mud and I made my way to the box, and I noticed it had a padlock on it, and I couldn't get it open. I mostly forgot about the box and went back to shore where her and I played in the mud and built a little house because she changed her mind about wanting to go into the water. After about an hour, her and I decided that we wanted to head back to our cabin and get ready to go to lunch at Azteca Grill. So we put on our shoes, grabbed our towels, and began our walk back to the trail where we had come from. As we walked up the trail, my girlfriend squeezed my hand and said, "What the F is that?" So I looked over to my right and I saw a coyote jumping on its hind legs like a kangaroo heading south. I laughed a little bit and told her that it was just a coyote, but she asked me, why was it jumping like that? And I had no answer. I've never seen a coyote jump on its hind legs as means of travel before in my life, and I've seen hundreds of coyotes in my 19 years on this earth. My girlfriend tried to lead me away and began walking down the trail, but I kept my head turned and was looking at this coyote. This is when it stopped jumping and turned around while still perched on its hind leg and stared directly at me and continued to hop on its hind leg for a few seconds. After this, it begins to hop in the same direction it was originally heading and goes back down onto all fours and runs off into the brush. The rest of the day went well up until her and I watched the episode of Beavis and Butthead on the couch where they asked to help build a pool in Mr. Anderson's backyard. My girlfriend was sitting to my right and I on her left. She turned to say something to me and I turned to my right to look at her when I noticed a pale figure behind a chain link that was right outside of our window, swaying back and forth quickly. I immediately stood up to go over to the window to see what was happening out there, and just as I stood, the figure turns away and runs off into the boat storage yard. That was on the other side of the fence. This was about 9:40 at night, so the only light was from the moon. It was tall, extremely tall, pale, and completely bald. I'm on the phone with my girlfriend as I'm writing this story down, and she's telling me as I type this that she had the urge not to look when I stood up. The next day, July 7th, nothing strange happened, and we really hoped that nothing else would. Until the 8th and 9th, when it all crescendoed into absolute horror. Her and I wanted to walk down to the nearest marina, Holloway's Marina, to spend some time together before she flew back home the next morning. We walked the half-mile down to Edgemore Road until we reached the marina. We spent about an hour there watching the ducks and walking along the docks. On our way back to the cabin, we saw a swing set and teeter ball pole. We saw there were no ball attached to the pole, only the rope. So my girlfriend jokingly said, "You should make it into a noose." So I did. I fashioned it into a very small noose. This is important later. And then untied it and walked away back to our cabin. For our last night there, her and I watched The Shining, so she rented it for us on Prime, and we got about halfway through the movie before we wanted to go share a cigarette together. I jokingly tried to scare her by saying that the coyote was going to peek around the kitchen wall and jump out at us on its hind legs. This terrified her, and she wanted to wait a little bit until she calmed down. So we waited another 10 minutes or so, and she said that she needed to put on her shoes in case we had to run, as a joke. After she got her shoes on, we headed out the door and a few hundred feet north down Edgemore Road, where we stood at the corner of Edgemore and another street and had our cigarettes. Her and I both said that we felt watched, but didn't say anything at the time because we didn't want to scare each other. I noticed as we were smoking how deathly quiet the area had become. There was absolutely no sound whatsoever. It was extremely eerie. I just finished my cigarette and hers was nearly done when from behind us we heard the loudest whistle either of us have ever heard. And both of us felt a gust of wind, and then the sound stopped coming from behind us and was suddenly coming from every direction around us and filling our ears. The whistle we heard turned into a guttural growl and howl for the last few seconds. It lasted about 7 seconds in total. Her and I booked it back to the cabin and immediately went to the bedroom with our hearts pounding from adrenaline. We lay down on the bed to give ourselves time to calm down, when after a few minutes came a faint tap, tap, tap. These taps continued for hours, moving all around the cabin, our bedroom window, the dining room window, but most of the taps came from the bathroom window down the hall. As we were losing our minds laying in bed, I started to think about the locations where we felt watched or experienced something strange, and my brain came to the horrifying conclusion that it formed a pentagram, with our cabin being the top point. I mentioned this to my girlfriend, and this only made us even more frightened. We managed to fall asleep, with all the lights on, of course. In the morning, we were ready to get the hell out of there. As I was taking out the trash for the last time, I looked up at the sign that displays the rules for the lodge playground, which is right near the dumpster, which is where I noticed a small noose hanging from the tree about 10 feet up. It was not there the night before. We were the only people staying at the lodge for the last 3 days that we were there. We hurried packing and headed down the mountain to get away from all of that craziness we experienced. We believe all of these events to be connected in some way. Her and I believe that we encountered a demonic entity or a skinwalker of some kind. I'm not one to label supernatural experiences usually, but I have no idea what else this could have been other than a skinwalker. Has anybody else experienced anything like this at Big Bear? I've been skeptic ever since knowing of these things. I have avoided saying the word in the subtitle. And whenever they're mentioned, I absolutely stop the conversation and do everything in my power to distract myself from the word in order to prevent them from being driven towards me. For this reason, I'll be using the word creature instead. Frankly, I'm not entirely sure if this thing really is an SW. Could be something similar, but I digress. This is the one thing that I've consistently avoided since adolescence. At the time of writing, it is 3:11 a.m. on Sunday, July 13th. I was on my way home from a friend's place, a bit groggy and feeling a bit down. I live about 30 minutes away in a small rural area, and I try to keep a good eye on the road at all times, as we live in deer country and I don't want to hit anything. Throughout the drive, I concentrated on the road like normal, and all went well until turning off the highway onto the road leading to my house. There is a large, low visibility hill right at the intersection to said road. As I crossed the horizon of the hill, there was a creature sitting motionless, tongue out, staring at my vehicle. It took the form of a dog, sort of a brown and black splotchy. However, I'm 100% certain that this was not a dog. Its eyes were large and lifeless. It didn't move. Only a flinch of the ear was visible, and that's the only way I knew it was real. It was hunched over like some sort of gargoyle. Initially, I went to honk at it, but as soon as my fingers grazed my horn, I was paralyzed in fear. I couldn't effing move. It was just there, hauntingly staring. It was the eyes, the absolute ungodly eyes. Dread consumed me and I hit the gas and turned onto the road. This is a gravel road, mind you. I sped all the way home about 4 kilometers away and have locked myself in my room all night. I can't move and sure as hell can't sleep. I don't understand why this creature was drawn to me. Perhaps my avoidance drove it closer. Nonetheless, I am absolutely effing petrified and certain that this thing was not a dog or anything of the sort. I apologize if this writing is poor. I am terrified and I'm not thinking straight and sure as hell not going to sleep anytime soon. Any thoughts would be great. For a little more information, I live near the Rocky Mountains if it helps. My father built a plywood cottage on 24-inch studs, thin walls, quickly during the summer of 1958. The next year, for some reason, the vacation got moved to the summer solstice, early for us, and we checked in Saturday mid-afternoon for 8 days. The very first night as we slept, there was a terrific bam on the end wall near my parents' tiny bedroom. This was a god-awful impact and nearly came through the 1/4-inch plywood on 24-inch center. I mention the spacing of the vertical studs because it is the flimsiest that I've ever seen anyone build with. All 5 of us were trembling on our tiny landing in front of the bedrooms. I asked, "What was that?" My mother instantly spun out a lie. A branch fell on the roof. I asked my dad, "Why don't you have that 12-gauge loaded?" But that was the end of the experience, and we all went back to bed. I proceeded to forget about it until I was in my 70s, at which point I reasoned that my dad had dynamited the 45-degree rock face that the back of the split-level cabin sat on. I guess that the rock was an easy way to elevate from the lake level to the hydro trail, which was about 150 feet to the rear of the cabin. This happened in late June of 1959. On the Muskoka-Haliburton line south of Dorset, on or near Highway 37. This was 8 years prior to the Patterson-Gimlin, and I think they were migrating north for the summer season. I am now 75, and nothing similar has ever happened. I've spent hours and hours on that lake and in those woods with my 22. Here is my original song, Bigfoot in a Box. Cameron. For copyright reasons, I'll be uploading this song to the Communities tab so that you can enjoy it there. Be sure to check it out. A huge thank you to Cameron for sharing both your incredible story and your song with the Ontario Cryptids community. It is truly appreciated. And of course, thanks to all of you for listening until the end, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode and the encounters we explored together. Now, a special shout out goes out to our current channel members, Elizabeth, Jim, and Teresa. Thank you guys for your continued support. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit that like button, the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another episode. And if you have an encounter of your own, I'd love to hear about it. Send your stories to ontariocryptids@gmail.com, and it could be featured in a future episode. Wishing you all a great week ahead, and don't forget to tune in for next week's episode of Ontario Cryptids.